Hello, Milwaukee Bucks fans. Welcome back to Bucks Latest, presented by FanArch. I'm your host, Dean Simon. Please consider liking, subscribing, and turning on those post notifications to stay up to date and in the know with all the latest Milwaukee Bucks updates. Alright, so first things first, probably the biggest story in the NBA now as NBA free agency and the offseason rolls along. Damian Lillard returns to the Portland Trail Blazers on a 3-year, $42 million deal. Goes now to pair with Drew Holiday in the backcourt. Now, of course, it's the post DeAndre Ayton era of the Trailblazers, so we'll see what happens. But Dame, after the wave and stretch from the Milwaukee Bucks, decides to go back home, go back where it all started. And as a guy that, sure, Damian Lillard's tenure with the Bucks over these past 2 years wasn't what it was cracked up to be, and I was originally one that thought that Damian Lillard had a real shot at winning an NBA championship. I won't say that Dame is fully to blame for the Bucks' dreams and hopes of really contending for a title or even getting out of the first round not coming to fruition, because I don't think there's anybody in the NBA that wants to compete at the highest level more and wants to win a title than Damian Lillard. That's his whole thing, that originally when he was going to be staying in Portland for what we thought was going to be the entirety of his career, that he was going to just stick it out, and though he wanted to win, he wanted to do it somewhere that was meaningful to him and where everything started, and he wasn't just going to switch sides, but don't let that fool you. He wanted to win more than anybody in the world, and of course, the eventual trade to the Bucks like that gave him his best shot at this point in his career. Now he's 35 years old, going back on a 3-year deal that will likely take him towards the end of his career. He went to the Bucks thinking that this was my chance to really compete for a title. This was my opportunity alongside Giannis. But injuries were really what derailed this. I think he was a fairly consistent player throughout the past 2 regular seasons, though he did have his months where he was setting the world on fire and months where he kind of was reclusive almost. So sure, you could nitpick specific games and stretches of time in Damian Lillard's tenure, but the overall injury misfortune and it never came together and really led to a convincing run in the Eastern Conference when you would have liked to think that at least in 2024 that they could have put up some type of competition against the Boston Celtics. I'm not saying the Bucks would have beaten the Celtics in their championship year in any stretch, because it was clear that the Celtics ran the East in that year and that they were going to come away with the title pretty convincingly. But the Bucks should have been able to put up at least a fight, or at least get out of the first round. But of course, it didn't come to be. Now Dame returns back to Portland, and he will be pairing with Drew Holiday, which is just a pretty ridiculous outcome if you're trying to do like a retrospective of the Damian Lillard to the Bucks for Drew Holiday and the whole 3-team trade, where now the Trailblazers, after essentially, and these are things that I've seen, or terms that I've seen people use on social media, that the Trailblazers loaned Damian Lillard to the Bucks for 2 seasons and in return got Drew Holiday twice. Of course, they flipped him the one time to the Celtics for Robert Williams and Malcolm Brogdon and some other assets, and I believe which turned into Denny Avdia, and they also brought in Toumani Camara, who has burst onto the scene as one of the best pure defensive players in the NBA today, and a 2029 Bucks pick and 3 Bucks pick swaps, I'm pretty sure. So essentially, you turned Dame and eventually Drew Holiday into all of this extra stuff, and then you end up reacquiring both Drew and Damian Lillard. I mean, you could say that this was, a long play by the Portland Trailblazers to get these guys back and also get all that value for them, but I feel like that would be similar to saying that, oh, Nico Harrison knew that the Luka trade was going to eventually lead to the Mavericks getting the number 1 pick. Like, you couldn't necessarily plan for the Damian Lillard era with the Bucks to come to such an abrupt end with the injury and him to get stretched and waived and then become a free agent all of a sudden, and then you have the opportunity to sign him for $14 million a year, and the Bucks are still paying him $22.5 million over the next half decade, but we're not going to talk about that. The Trailblazers, obviously, this in the grand scheme of things, it's going to look as though they had this huge IQ play, and they really thought this thing out, and they got the best out of these players, and it was all planned. But truthfully, you can't plan for things like this, for the Celtics needing to cut costs with the new CBA and the new apron tax rules, and Damian Lillard tearing his Achilles and being released. You don't plan for those things, but the Trailblazers took advantage of both of those things. Now, the Blazers have the 2029 first from the Bucks, the 3 pick swaps, Robert Williams. They got DeAndre Ayton, though they lost him for nothing in free agency. Malcolm Brogdon, Denny Avdia, Toumani Camara. They got all of this value, and now Dame and Drew Holiday are united together to form one of the best offense-defense backcourts in the NBA. Even, regardless of age, these guys can still get it done on their respective ends of the floor. And Drew Holiday's not that bad of an offensive player either, of course, but his efficiency has gone down with age, as could be expected, especially for a guy that has focused on defense for the entirety of his career to this point. But of course, what did the Bucks get out of that? Nothing really. You leveraged the Drew Holiday's defense. You traded it for Dame's offense, which at the time was a risky decision. Obviously, in retrospect, was as well. And it leads to this. Of course, the Trailblazers came out of that whole situation on top, but it's really tough to see. Anyways, moving forward and not sticking on the Dame thing, because at the end of the day, he's not a Buck anymore. Drew Holiday's not a Buck anymore, so we have to focus on the now. We have to focus on today's Milwaukee Bucks guards and their newest Milwaukee Bucks guard, Cole Anthony. I think he is going to have an opportunity to really do some things for the Bucks this year, not just because of his reputation as a pure scorer and guy that you could bring in off the bench as the sixth man to really get the offense going, like a Jordan Clarkson with the Utah Jazz type of roller, or really any sixth man of the year candidate winner in recent, or sixth man of the year winner in recent years, like Eric Gordon, or not Eric Gordon, like Lou Williams, like Jamal Crawford, like Jordan Clarkson, like all these guys that are just shoot first shooting guards, that their main goal is to come into the game and provide instant offense. Of course, Cole Anthony fits that description to a T, but it's possible that he may see a fair share of minutes as the Bucks starting point guard. And I think purely, while he hasn't been as prone to passing or racking up high assist numbers in recent years, and that could be attributed to lessened playing time and lessened opportunity with the Magic, he would be thrust into a starting lineup that is perfect in terms of providing Cole Anthony with spacing plus Giannis. Essentially, if he was to be thrown in the starting lineup, let's say with, a lineup of Cole Anthony, Gary Trent Jr., Taurean Prince, Giannis, and Miles Turner, that is the absolute perfect mix of spacing for a guy like Cole Anthony to just let him work, let him do him, find his spaces, and get into a groove within the offense. Because, as I've said in previous videos, and especially when Cole Anthony was originally signed to the Milwaukee Bucks and bought out by the Grizzlies, that when he played for the Magic, you had to kind of cut him some slack a little bit, because nobody on the Magic could create their own offense, and everybody struggled, especially in the efficiency department. They just flat out were one of the worst offenses in the NBA, and it was evident because nobody except Paolo and Franz, who both couldn't necessarily do it efficiently so far in their careers with the Magic, no one was able to score one-on-one and be that main threat, and the spacing was completely terrible. So you got to give a guy like Cole Anthony a little bit of a break with regard to his efficiency. So I feel like now going to the Bucks, where there's two guys that led the league or were, among the league leaders in three-point percentage, and you have a guy like Miles Turner, who is known for his floor-stretching abilities. You have guys like Bobby Portis coming in, of course, AJ Green, Kevin Porter Jr., all these guys that can shoot, that can flat-out shoot. That's going to work wonders for Cole Anthony to start his Milwaukee Bucks career, and I'm really excited to see what happens going forward with him. Anyways, the final segment today is that while I won't get into all of the specifics, all the details, an NBA investigation into a domestic violence case against Kevin Porter Jr. was concluded recently. This is stemming from an incident that happened when he was arrested in Manhattan in 2023. And again, won't go into details, but the NBA and the NBA Players Association, with new president, I believe, Fred VanVleet, they decided that because of his actions and because of Kevin Porter Jr. entering into a plea deal, that he would serve a suspension technically, that he was handed a suspension by the NBPA, but the NBPA also decided that the suspension has technically already been served with the amount of time that KPJ missed just being out of the league for a year because he went to play in Greece or wherever in the year between when he started playing for the Clippers this past year and 2 years ago. So with the full season basically that he missed, the NBPA decided that, he already kind of served his time. The suspension wasn't going to be too long. I think it was going to be a 4-game regular season suspension, so it wasn't going to be that big of a deal. But it's just good to know that this thing has finally ended, that this whole saga has concluded, and we can move on. Kevin Porter Jr. can move on and really focus on simply on-court duties as the 2025-26 season will be getting going in a couple of months, and he'll have to be ramping up for training camp. Now he can focus solely on being potentially the starting point guard for the next year, the next 2 years for the Milwaukee Bucks alongside Giannis, while he's still trying to compete for titles and while he's still at the height of his prime, smack dab in his prime. So that's good to know as well. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for watching another episode of Bucks Latest presented by FanArch. I've been Dean Simon. Make sure to let me know what you think in the comments, subscribe, and turn on those post notifications to stay up to date and in the know with all the latest Milwaukee Bucks updates. I'll see you guys in the next one, and go Bucks.